Welcome back to another episode of Buckle Up, an ultra running conversation with Simon and Brian. Simon, how are you doing?
Well, Brian, since you asked about my knees, actually, I went for a run last weekend with Nora and friend Sierra, maybe like 23 miles on trail. It wasn't nothing crazy, but god dang, my knees started to hurt, my ankles started to hurt, and I realized that I'm not getting any younger. So I think I'm going to take a little bit more time to recover after my last race and then get back to it. But that was really, I don't know, it didn't feel good. But other than that, I'm doing very well. How about yourself? How about your knees?
My knees are good, my Achilles is good, but we have the January crud that just swept our house. Gosh, we all had the stomach bug. I had a cold the week before that. So it's been one heck of a January, and I'm on the mend now from the sickness and the illnesses. So I'm looking to get back outside, but I still have a lingering cough, and you'll hear it in this episode if I can't mute it out, but here and there. But I am on the mend and feeling a little bit better. I did get some great news today. I was accepted into Team Run to Empower for Vermont Adaptive. I'm going to raise some funds and get my way into the Vermont 100. So that'll complete the full circle. The Wasatch Lottery is the first weekend in February. And if I don't get in, I'm pretty sure that they'll hold spots for me, seeing as though I'm trying to Grand Slam. So that's exciting news, even though I'm not feeling great.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you're going to have a really cool summer with the Grand Slam, Old Dominion, Vermont, Leadville, of course, yes. Your tenure at Leadville and then Wasatch. Great experience for sure. Historical race that have definitely been on the list of ultra running for a long time. But there's also a very big race, very famous race that we'll talk about today with our guest.
That's right. Have you ever heard of the Hardrock 100, Silverton, Colorado? Well,
I have
today's
heard
guest
of the Hardrock. I have applied to it, and I'm still waiting to get in. Anytime now. I don't know for you.
Actually, we have Dale Garland on the show today. Dale is the race director for the Hardrock 100. He helped found it and build it up to what it is today, and he's been around since the first race in 1992. Goes way into depth about the history and where it's come, and he kind of touches on where he sees it in the next couple of years as well.
Yeah, I think, Hardrock is obviously in the San Juan in Colorado, and Nora and I, if we're in Colorado and we have some time, that's definitely where we're going to go for hiking. The nature there is absolutely fantastic, but I think that's really just a small reason why Hardrock is so popular nowadays. Of course, the landscape is wonderful, but I think it goes a lot through what makes ultra running and trail running so great and the values that are important within the community. I think Hardrock reflects these values very well, and you can see from the decision that they've made through the years that they care a lot about runners and runners experience much more than on numbers specifically. So quality over quantity and values and principle over anything else, which was really reflected with our conversation with Dale today.
Yeah, he's an early adopter, an early pioneer of ultra running, having completed the first Colorado Trail crossing. Yeah, and that's cool as shit. That was 1988. That's a great story and a great segue.
I mean, he was navigating that with like paper maps, like some pirates or something. That's just crazy when you think about it. Things have changed.
I'm old enough, Simon, to remember paper maps, but back in the 1900s, I remember paper maps. But man, it's a great conversation with Dale. He's just a super nice guy and really personable. You'll hear it in that conversation. We could have talked for another hour and let time go by, but we also wanted to respect his time and his energy to come on the show and speak with us evening. So without further ado, here's Dale Garland from the Hardrock 100. Thanks for listening. Thanks so much for sitting down and talking with us tonight, Dale. Glad to have you on the show. I'm really excited about this conversation. First things first, how are you doing this evening?
Doing really well, Brian. Made it through. I'm coming to you guys from the Front Range of Colorado, and the weather here is what it should be in the winter, and we got some snow, which is something in Colorado we're always really. I mean, you're in Glenwood, right? So you know how important snow is, and so we're happy about that. Life is good as a retired individual.
Excellent. That's right. Actually, I think your weather is actually looking like a Colorado winter for once. Usually it's a bit warmer over there. I was over there in Denver area a few weeks ago, and it was colder there than it was in Glenwood, which is
Right.
not usually the case.
Right. It got to the point where even my dog didn't want to go outside to do her business. She was like, "Nah, no, we're not going outside." But it's all good now.
Dale, I wanted to kind of bring it back to the beginning and how you found yourself into this crazy sport and how you got here. I know the first ultra you did though, because we talked about this offline prior a couple days ago, but I won't spoil it just yet. So anyway, how did you get into ultra and how did you find yourself here?
Well, it was one of those things that there were just a couple of things that kind of clicked to get me to this point. Some were good, some were bad. This all started for me back in 1986 about. I read an article in the newspaper about this trail that was being opened in Colorado called the Colorado Trail. And it kind of intrigued me a lot. And so I read the article, and fortunately for me, it gave me the name of the person who was putting the trail together, this matriarch. Some of your listeners may know her name is Goody Gaskell. And so I made the pilgrimage to see Goody, and she says, "Yeah, we're going to open this trail." And I said, "Well, I'm a runner, so how can I help you celebrate this thing that's showcasing Colorado?" And she said, "Well, why don't you plan on running it and be part of the opening ceremony?" And I had never done anything longer than a marathon. So the idea of running across Colorado was at points scary, but also very intriguing to me. And so I set on this path to train to run across Colorado and made a stop in Glenwood Springs in 1988 to run the Doc Holliday Run. And that was my first exposure to ultra running. And then when we actually ran the Colorado Trail, there were 4 of us, and we stopped in Leadville, and I saw the posters. This was late July, early August, and I saw these posters for this thing called the Leadville 100. And I went, this is interesting. So my father, who was my biggest cheerleader, he said, "I'm going to go talk to this woman at the bottom of this poster that said for more information, contact Merrill Lee O'Neill." So he said, "I'm going to go find Merrill Lee O'Neill," because he was out supporting me while we were running. And got to know Merrill Lee, got to know Ken Klober, the some of the early race directors at Leadville, and came back after we finished. We did finish running the Colorado Trail, and then came back to Leadville and ran Leadville, my first Leadville 100 in 1988. There weren't a lot of choices there. I mean, that was when ultra running was in its infancy. Fast forward to a couple of years, I was running actually at Western States, and my father was there crewing for me and happened to run into this woman by the name of Molly Hardman, who I'm going to explain a little bit more later, but her husband, Gordon, they just happened to be at the same aid station at the same time. And they got to talking, your son's so-and-so, your husband's so-and-so. And my father really volunteered me to help with Hardrock and said, "Well, why don't you, told Molly, tell your husband to give Dale a call, because Gordon was he's the founder of Hardrock. And it was his idea to put this thing called Hardrock together. So my dad kind of volunteered me to help with Hardrock that was 1990. And I got involved with Hardrock in 1990. And then in 1992, our first year of running Hardrock, I suffered a hip injury, which ended my competitive career. But by that time I'd gotten used to and enjoyed and loved the ultra running community. And so I became the race director for Hardrock in 1992. Ever since then, it's been part of my life.
That's a big part of your life, I'm sure. Was that the first iteration in 1990, and then 92 you were the race director? Is that what I heard?
No, the first Hardrock was 1992 was our first year.
All right, so you've been the race director the whole time.
Correct. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And Dale, I saw that you had the FKT in 1998 for the Colorado Trail, which, as its first running.
Yeah, 1988.
Yeah. As the first running of it. And I thought it was funny because they mentioned that you did it collegiate East when the collegiate West wasn't even there yet. So
right.
We kind of know that. So I thought that was kind of funny because in 1988 the collegiate West wasn't even there yet. That's only been a few years open. So but that's awesome.
Yeah, it was this whole idea of running the Colorado Trail for us was part adventure, part celebratory to be part of the opening of the Colorado Trail. So we literally it took us 17 days. There were days where we actually were running by people as they were putting in trail marking signs and stuff like that. We got lost almost every day, because, just all we had were these USGS maps with nothing on it and that kind of thing. But, when we got there, and it was really a great introduction to the sport of ultra running, because it was something I just really, really enjoyed.
That first outing of the Colorado Trail, how did you navigate those 17 days? Were you just camping on the side of the trail, sleeping when it got dark, or sleeping when you needed to? Was it a true ultra in that style, or what did that look like back in the day?
Yeah, things like what Kyle Curtin is doing. He just set the FKT for running the Colorado Trail supported. Kyle, by the way, is running Hardrock this year. But for us, it was get up in the morning, run till 3 or 4 in the afternoon, pulled into a camp. We had established where we were going to be from day to day to day. And my dad and two of the other fathers who were along with us had camp set up. They had food cooked. They had everything laid out for us. It was the greatest vacation I think I've ever had, And so then we just get up the next day, roll out of the sleeping bag. We didn't even have to pack our own sleeping bags, our own tents. We just got up and they packed up camp. It was just, traveling show from Durango to Denver.
Yeah, sign me up. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was great. It was great.
Dale, I wanted to talk about the origins of Hardrock, and you mentioned that you were the first race director in '92. It sounded like it was a 2-year process just to get it off the ground and moving. How many iterations of course trails did you go through to come up with the current trail, and its clockwise and counterclockwise counterparts?
The idea of Hardrock, was created by Gordon Hardman, who lived in Boulder, who spent a lot of time in Lake City. So in the late 80s, there was an economic downturn in the San Juans, which was heavily dependent on mining, and the mines started to shut down and things like that. So Gordon kind of came up with this idea. It's like, how can we bring some economic development to these towns which are experiencing this economic downturn, as well as do an event that is a little bit above and beyond what was out there currently. And again, we're talking about in 1988. So put an ad. I mean, there was no internet, there was no social media or anything like that. He put an ad in Ultra Running Magazine, say, I'm thinking of doing this. Anybody want to help me? And he got, as I said, I got involved. So there are three other guys that also answered Gordon's ad, basically, one of which lived in Ouray, Rick Trujillo, who some of your listeners might know. He's been one of the pioneers of trail running forever. And then John Kappas, who had grown up in Telluride, and then a friend of his, Charlie Thorne. And it was really the 5 of us that put Hardrock together. The original idea was to go from 1 year start in Silverton, then the next year start in Ouray, then the next year start in Lake City, and then the next year start in Telluride. Every year would be start and finish in these 4 mining communities. But in 1988, the only town that really embraced this concept was Silverton. And so that's when we came up with this idea of starting and finishing the clockwise and the counterclockwise directions. Now, how many times have we changed the course? The course is basically the same as we laid it out 1988. I mean, it's been tweaked a little bit here and there.
Sure.
Gordon's idea was, how much of this can we do that is not on pavement? That was his big thing. And so, we'd find social trails, or we'd find these other trails that we could use. The general flow of the course and the highlights of the course have remained steady since 1992.
And Dale, since 1992, the first running of it, how many have you had to cancel? Unfortunately, I know even in my own tenure, there's been a couple snow years, and maybe there was a fire year, obviously a COVID year. So how many iterations of it have not happened due to some unforeseen circumstances?
Right, unforeseen circumstances. This year is our 30th running, and we have had to cancel or postpone 4 years. 2 for snow. The snow levels just were above what we thought was safe for our runners and our volunteers. 1 year for fire, and 1 year for COVID.
That's not bad. And I think I've actually been around for almost all of those, I think.
Right. Yeah. It was, and it's been one of those things that every year, in fact, we have we call it a go, no-go date, which is Memorial Day weekend. And that's when we look at we look at the data in terms of snow and the long-range forecasting. And then we say, it's a go or a no-go. And fortunately, we've been able to to hold it all but those 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, the race has obviously evolved in a sense of popularity and becoming definitely more mainstream. Might not be the world because ultra running is always a little bit niche. But I'm curious to hear from your perspective. I'm sure it was never the goal that the race would be so popular, but what do you think makes this race stand out compared to other races?
Simon, I think we've done a couple of things very intentionally that I think have been to our benefit. If we're talking about how we've grown with the sport and things like that. One is that we've been very intentional to a set of values that we established very early on in terms of how we treat people, how we treat the environment, how we interact with the communities and things like that. And so people, when they come to Hardrock and when they come to the San Juans, we've pretty much laid in this culture of values, of principles that we try to follow to this day. And those haven't really changed much since the early years as well. The other part, I think, is, and I can't take a whole lot of credit for this because I think it's just the magnificence of the San Juans. If your listeners have not been to the San Juans, it's one of the most spectacular places in the world. And it's just one of those special areas, and we've been fortunate enough. We've had great cooperation with our communities. We've had great cooperation with the Forest Service, the BLM, other user groups to create something in this case that really does showcase a magnificent part of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. For those who have not seen the 14ers in the areas, I can give a list of my favorite. I think for me, the Chicago Basin, which is definitely not on your course, but I love this mountain set. It's just always amazing to go there. And it's very remote, which also reminds me a lot of Hardrock. You're in the wild. You're not next to a road, or, well, I mean, I guess sometimes there's dirt road, but you're in the wild, and that makes it very special.
Right. Yeah, and that was wild and tough. That's the mantra, and that's the mantra we keep. For someone who isn't familiar with Hardrock, I think the best way to kind of put it into context or help conceptualize it, it's running from sea level to the top of Mount Everest and back at an average elevation of a little over 2 miles above sea level. And so, 33,000 feet of up and 33,000 feet of down, crossing 12,000 feet 13 times, going over 13,000 feet 6 times, and topping out at a little over 14,000 feet. It's a pretty spectacular course.
Yeah. And you're more likely to be eaten by a bear than hit by a car also. So that's something.
Yeah. Or sheep and the sheepdogs. That's our part too. Yeah.
I would say a mountain lion, but I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah. So, and we've tried to, as the sport has changed and as the sport has evolved, I know we could talk a little bit about that as well. We've tried to kind of grow along with it. And it's a balance. It really is to try to maintain something that we being our board of directors, our run committee, the people who come to Hardrock year after year, our volunteers who really believe in what we're doing and what we stand for, and try to balance that out with some call them pressures or influences or whatever of ultra running as it becomes a more, Simon, using your word, kind of a little bit more mainstream.
I think, something that I respect a lot is that you've, and I'm sure it's intentional, but also partly permitting, but I think the race has grown in popularity and in quality of your offering, but you haven't necessarily grown in size and becoming a little bit of a circus like some other races have become. And you're really staying true to your core of the type of event that you're organizing. And having run these bigger races, even though the landscape can be fantastic, the volunteer can still be fine. At some point when you reach 1,000, 2,000 runner, it's just not the same. And you guys, on the other hand, have stayed true to that. Of course, then there's a wait list, but you can't have everything and people will be frustrated.
Yeah, you can't. And exactly, and it's, we try to give a memorable and meaningful experience to everybody who comes, whether they're the volunteers or the runners, the pacers, whoever. And we've reconciled the fact, we had over 3,000 people apply to Hardrock in 2025. It was our biggest applicant pool ever. And there is no way that even if we increased our field by double, we would make a dent in that. And so it's been very intentional to say, what is kind of our upper limit of how many people we think that we can provide that memorable and meaningful experience for, and do it in a logistical and a professional way.
Just to clarify, is that number 125? I can't recall.
It's
146. Okay.
146.
So,
And there are two people who get a pass in our lottery, and that's the first male and the first female finisher from the year before.
Yeah, that's not how I'm getting in.
so I got 144 chances.
For the first 10, I mean, we didn't even need a lottery until 2002. So see, you're just a little bit late to the party, buddy. Yeah, that's all. You know,
There was 10 years without. It was 10 years without a lottery.
Yeah, I mean, and we basically, if you had, or if you had run a mountain event, it didn't even have to be a 100-miler. If you could demonstrate that you were not a safety risk to yourself or to us, we'd let you in. You know, our first Hardrock, believe it or not, we had 42 people show up, and it wasn't until 2002 that we actually had enough people to say, okay, we're full. This is as many as we're going to take, and then in a sense, it's grown year after year from that.
Now you have qualifying standard, and quite frankly, you've influenced my running career quite significantly thanks to that. And I mean, so far so good. I appreciate your selection. I'm curious to hear what goes into the process of you selecting those races. They're obviously mountain race. They're known events. Some of them are hard to get in anyway, but they're all quality. I mean, I must have done 5 or 10 of them, and honestly, good choice. When I'm looking for a race, I go on your list. I'm like, all right, this is the year for, and I pick one of them.
Right. Pirin in Bulgaria or whatever. Yeah, there's a couple of criteria that our qualifying committee, the group that puts it together, kind of looks at. One is if a person finishes this event, this race, this run, do they stand a good chance of finishing Hardrock? So that's one thing. The second thing is, now that we are kind of known around the world, we think that it's important that people don't have to fly to the United States or fly just to one specific location. So we've, over these last couple of years, looked at, are there races in South America? Are there races in Asia? Are there races in other places that we can bring into our community, and still people who finish those, you're not going to get 14,000 feet in the Philippines. It's just not going to happen. But are there some things where they have to, be somewhat, self-sufficient? Is there distances between aid stations where they have to do some planning and things like that? So it's an art, and and we know from Hardrock that if you become a Hardrock qualifier, then there's some economic advantage to that. So we want to be cognizant of that as well, but we also want to make sure that at the end of the day, we have a list we have 31 qualifiers now, that if you finish one of those, you're going to stand a good chance at Hardrock. Do those events kind of represent some of those values that we think are important in terms of how they treat the environment, and how do they treat the runners and the volunteers and things like that. We're in a real fortunate position to be able to kind of pick and choose, but sometimes it's not very easy, because people go, well, how come this one isn't, or this one isn't? Because there's a ton of them out there.
Yeah, for sure. And you've had movement also.
Yeah.
And you've had movement where some races were and then they're not anymore, and you've had to introduce a few. Actually, the newer one in Japan, I might try to do it someday, like Biwa. I did Fuji, and I think that one was pulled off your list, but that's okay. I was happy to be there anyway. So
right. Yeah.
Dale, are you seeing, in the change with adding some European races, are you seeing more European applications come into the process?
Yeah, this year we had applications from 75 countries.
Wow.
And I would say, if you think of any European country especially, and part of that's because we've expanded, our qualifying pool, but France is our second most. We get more for international applications from France than almost any place else other than Canada. And, same with Spain and Great Britain and things like that. So so we kind of want to appeal to that market as well.
Yeah. I mean, I feel that for something like that, it's true, the qualifying standard will help, but I think also there's been prominent name that have been vocal about thinking Hardrock is a good race. I mean, old school would be Kilian, and you have François Den. So you have these kind of high profile people that do come for Hardrock, and then people in these countries that follow these athletes will take notes and say, okay, that sounds like it's a cool race. I should look it up. And then, of course, as soon as you hear about it, it's easy to be charmed by it. I think there's a lot of things that makes it unique. I think, just kissing the rock. I mean, that's a classic picture. I'm sure there's a story behind why you start kissing the rock.
Can I tell the story, Simon?
Of course you can tell the story.
Of course, tell the story. Let's hear it. Let's hear the story about this giant white rock in downtown Silverton and why people are kissing it.
And why they're kissing it. But I want to kind of respond to Simon's thing too. People like Kilian and Francois and Courtney and all the names that your listeners are probably familiar with now have honored us with their coming to Hardrock. I remember talking to Kilian one time, and this was several years ago, maybe like the first year he got here, because he's spent a lot of time in Silverton and the San Juans. But he goes, what I really like is I can walk down the street of Silverton and nobody knows who I am. And stuff like that. And so it's that, that star thing that sometimes is, but we try to make sure that we welcome them. But we also want to make sure that we respect their privacy and that kind of thing too, and not make a big deal of it. So Mother Nature doesn't play favorites. And so, sometimes it's a good day in the mountains and some days it isn't,
I want you to get to the story of the rock.
The story of the rock.
Yeah.
For your listeners, probably the thing that we are known for almost more than anything else is our finish, where we have this big rock it does sit in Silverton year round. We drag it out every year, put it in the middle of the street. And in order to finish Hardrock, you have to kiss that rock. And, I'd love to tell you that it was an intentional thing. It was a marketing thing. It was some great idea that I had in the middle of the night that kept me up. But the reality was, at the very beginning of Hardrock, I totally forgot about how to construct a finish line. And so we were standing there at the start, and I was doing my, you're going to have 48 hours and blah, blah, all the things that an event director does. And somebody said, well, how do we know where we're finished? And I went, crap, I didn't even build a finish line. I don't have a finish line. So I looked around, and here was this rock. I said, okay, so you have to touch this rock. That'll be what it is. And so that went on for like 2 years. Then it kind of evolved from there we found Silverton has a week of activities that celebrate the mining tradition, the hard rock mining tradition called Hard Rockers Holidays. And so there are these big rocks with mining holes, drill holes and stuff like that. So I said, what if we just got one of those, and kind of a nod to the mining legacy. I said, okay, so now instead of just this little rock that's sitting in the middle of the path, you have to touch this big rock. Well, and then it went from touching it, then some guy kissed it, and then we went from kissing it to this rock. Well, then it had to have our logo painted on it, and it's gotten to the point now that it is this iconic thing that is so emblematic and symbolic of it just blows me away every year, because when it gets there, it's with hushed tones, and people are like just looking at this thing in awe, and people, they want to have their picture taken, but they don't want to touch it because it might be bad karma to touch it before you finish and stuff like that. So it's become this iconic thing that is just so cool. And some of the coolest and most dramatic and most emotional times I've seen as Hardrock's run director has been what people happen to do, or what happens at that rock. I've seen engagements. I've seen, just tears flow, from people who this means so much to them. I've seen couples come in. We allow kids and dogs and families to come together. So it's always this great family bonding moment and stuff like that. So it is one of the coolest things that we have going for us. And it's all because I wasn't organized enough to make anything else happen early on.
We had 48 hours to think something up, right?
Yeah.
It raises two questions for me, honestly. The first one is the original rock still around?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's still there.
It
You
is.
see it, but you know that
Yeah.
it's not.
Well, you know what happens, Simon, is, if you or Brian, if you live in Colorado and stuff, and freeze and thaw is a thing. And so after about 10 years, our first rock, literally as we were picking it up to move it to the center to the finish line, fell apart. I mean, just fell apart. And I remember, I was doing something else, and somebody who was in charge of doing that came up and go, Dale, I think we've got a problem. I go, no, we just have opportunities. They go, no, we got a problem. The rock broke into all these like pieces. So luckily there was a guy, Roger Rublik, who was pretty handy, and out comes this bonding cement, all these construction things, the straps and everything to get this thing put back together, just so we could get through the year before we could go pick another rock, Hardrock 2, which we're still on. But no, Hardrock 1 still has a place of honor in Silverton, right? Kendall Ski Lodge. You can go and see the original rock in all of its glory.
So, okay, because I think I've seen that. So there's the painting on that one, right? Also, but it's kind of washed out a little bit. Okay, so that is the original.
That
I
is
don't
the
know, touch this
original.
rock.
Nope.
Oh, wow. I did not
That is
realize.
the original one. And then the other one, if you're in so Simon, you've been to Silverton, yes? It right by where the school gym is, there's this little pocket park, and that's where we put the rock. And it's just part of Silverton town. I mean, Silverton's only a town of 450 people, so it's but it just sits there year round. And then on the Wednesday before Hard Rock, the town comes with their equipment, their bulldozers and their snow removal tractors, and puts it right in front of the school. And then on Sunday they come and get it and put it back.
That's pretty cool. And I guess the second question for me is, do you actually stop the clock when they touch the rock, or they do cross a line? You got to stay true to your purpose.
I'm only laughing
because
there's a controversy around one particular finish, I think.
Oh, really?
But no, we don't have like an electronic mat or anything like that. So it really is, when do we see them kiss the rock? And I'm laughing.
You got to hurry up. No foreplay. You just go straight to the kiss,
Yeah, exactly. If you're running as hard as you can and you break out a few teeth, that's just the cost of kissing the rock, But we had one in 2015. We have a 48-hour cutoff. We had our last runner finish at 47 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds. And he was a little slow in kissing the rock. And, but he was right. He was draped all over and stuff like that. I mean, he had finished, But there were a couple of people who said, wait a minute, he didn't finish because he didn't kiss the rock. That shouldn't count. It's like, I'm going to let it count, because he was there.
He was there.
Yeah.
Dale, you shared the story about the rock falling apart, Hard Rock 1.
Yeah.
Maybe you got another story of like another challenge over the course of 30 years, like another whimsical thing that happened mid-race that you got to scramble, and how did you figure it out?
Yeah, two. Okay. One is something. One. Can I tell two stories? Is that okay?
Sure, of course.
The first one. One of the other things, along with kissing the rock, is that there will always be somebody at the finish line. There's never that. Once we activate that finish line every year, there's at least one person there. A lot of times it's just me. At 3:00 in the morning on Sunday morning, there isn't a whole lot of public interest, but that was, again, by design. After our first year, we finished at another location in Silverton, and we were just crammed into this little camper trailer. Molly Hardman, Gordon Hardman's wife, and myself and her two little kids, and it was raining and stuff like that. And we hear this knock on the trailer door. It's like knock, 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 and it's like, you get it. No, you get it. It's cold and rainy, and there was a runner there, and I don't even remember who it is, but he said, I just finished. Is there anybody I should tell or anything like that? And I went, here's this person who just went, and we weren't very good at race directing and organizing things the first year. It's like, this guy just did something amazing, and there was nobody there to see him finish or to say congratulations. And I took a vow to myself. I said, that will never happen again. And so either it will be me, or, we work really hard to make sure that the last finishers, we have a great golden hour when everybody shows up the last hour to see people finish and stuff like that, because that's a value that we think is really important, that everybody gets celebrated, whether you're first or last and that kind of thing. But it came out of this idea that, man, some guy just did something that, and nobody was there to say congratulations. And that was so, but so that was one.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, the second one happened in 2018, where it was up on right towards the last, in the clockwise direction. It was between the last checkpoint, Cunningham Gulch, and the finish. And it was, the storm moved in. It was one of the worst lightning storms, rainstorms I'd ever been experienced, in 40 years of living in the San Juans. People were just diving for cover under the rocks, and they were like, we were literally afraid we were going to die, because the lightning was just bouncing around, and it bounced and stuff like that. And it was scary. And what it proved to me was that even as organized as we had become, there are certain things that you just can't prepare for. And you have to always think about safety. You always have to think about that runner who's stuck up on a ridge, and how are we going to get them down if we have to, and that kind of thing. And so we celebrate, but I also want to make sure, and they kind of changed I guess the point I'm trying to make with this one is, it went from, oh yeah, they'll all survive, they're just out there on their own, to we can have a challenging course, but at the end of the day, we're responsible for people, and we're putting them in a very, very potentially hostile environment that they just have to be, not nurtured or not that, but you just have to be very mindful of that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally understand that. I think you expect people to be able to take care of themselves, and most people that will be up there will be able to take care of themselves. But at some point, there's a number thing going on, and with terrible bad luck with weather, with someone who just happens to twist his ankle, it's just bad luck over bad luck. Yeah. And as a race director, you have, we expect some level of support in these conditions. And the fact that it's remote is not a good excuse to say, well, you die out there, that's your problem. And I think what's good and
Simon,
pioneer in the sport have helped with that. I tell that to everyone. Look, I guess there's 3 or 4 people that are racing today, but for everyone else, we are in the mountain, and yes, we're having fun, but you should always remember that it is the wild. It can be dangerous, and you need to help each other out there, especially in those conditions. Sometimes don't just trust that someone says, yeah, I'm fine. I mean, if they say it with that tone, it's okay. But sometimes oh yeah, I'm fine. It's no, you're not fine. I'll stay with you. We go down together. It takes me 1 more hour. Who cares? Because you as a race director won't always be able to take care of everyone immediately, right? But you need to strive in that direction. The first story, though, I think really shows why Hardrock is so popular, I think, which shows how much you care about every single runner that finishes, except that one guy that one time in that one night. But this guy,
everyone else
relate to that, because I think if you win, there's going to be people. If you finish last, there's going to be people. If you finish at 3 to 4 in the morning, and you're kind of mid-packer, front mid, there's nobody. It's really dead, and it's so anticlimactic. It's like, wow, I had the best race of my life. Usually I would finish in the middle of the day, but I finished at 3 in the morning because I pushed so hard, and you cross the line. And I've never not seen anyone, but there's been situations where there's just a race director or someone. I was like, wow, that was epic, but nobody knows. And at least there's one person that cares enough to be there. And I think that's really important, actually.
Yeah. Well, what's really cool about our people too is we have a fully staffed aid station at the finish line inside of the Silverton School gym. I mean, they're cooking food, they're cooking soup and everything like that. And so people, as they finish, they just hang out in this school gym, and their families are there and stuff like that. And then whenever another runner comes in or is coming in, there'll be an announcement. There's another runner coming in, and if they're ambulatory, if they can get up, they'll all come out and cheer, and then they'll go back and talk with their family, and then the next, back and forth, and which is, I think, a real tribute to the kind of people who finish Hardrock as well. That they want to be part of everybody's celebration.
I have a short Hardrock story from 2013. I believe it was 2013. I volunteered with Betsy Kalmeyer to course sweep, and I swept from Telluride to the finish, past Island Lake, and through that section there. It was great, but I had to apply for it, or I had to like give information. I don't know if I had to apply for it, but I had to give some information, and I was a little taken back. It was like an application process. I had to show that I was going to be safe on the course by myself, and that I was able to handle my own self, especially as a sweep, because I am essentially
You're
last
the last
person
one. You're the
coming
last
through.
one.
Yeah, and I had some medical training at the time. I mean, just some first aid stuff and that kind of stuff. And then I had two other helpers. And in the other side of that coin is that I had two other helpers, and they were visiting from Wyoming or something like that. And we all just met literally at the parking lot. Somebody drove us over to Telluride. This wild man drove us over to Telluride on this mountain road at like way faster than we thought was safe, but it was fine.
Must have been overpass or something.
Yeah, but you guys drive like that, so I get it. So we get over there, he drops us off, and he's like, "That's the way to go." So we take off, and we start carrying all the pins back. And I just saw that couple; they had their first baby just this past year, and I saw the husband. He was at Run Rabbit Run this year, running 100th, and so we've stayed in contact since 2013.
Wow,
in and out, yeah. So I made like lifelong friends through this volunteering process. So just kind of like reiterates the whole family vibe of ultra running and Hardrock specifically. And then the safety measures that you guys took to keep me and my newfound friends safe out there on our own. Because it's not for everybody. It's not course marking or picking up the flagging from the Colfax Marathon. It's a bit different.
Exactly. We've kind of talked a little bit about the changes in the sport of ultra running as we progress, I love the fact that we're giving more people the experience to experience some great places in the world, on trails and things like that. But not everybody is prepared for that level of commitment, that level of safety and things like that. And as we see people like, oh yeah, I'd like to try, trail running, or I'd like to do this. That's great. I mean, we'd love it, but you've got to kind of temper that with making sure that you've got some things in place that will make sure that these people are going to get back safely. In one of our biggest, I guess, challenges is keeping a balance between those values, those principles, those things of being in the mountains and being safe in the mountains with new people who may or may not have that experience or may not have those skills. And so how do we balance that out, and how do you keep the spirit of what we do alive and that kind of stuff versus exposing it and letting new people experience it. And I know our lottery is something, and we can talk a little bit about that if you want to. A lot of people saying, well, Hardrock, it's a closed thing. You can't get in it until you can't run Hardrock till you once you get in, you're in, kind of thing. We actually this year had 56% of our lottery applicants are new runners. It's actually more people who have not run Hardrock than have run Hardrock in our lottery.
Yeah, I mean, I think the safety part varies a lot depending on what's the background of someone. My background was much more hiking and mountaineering, which I think is a good background exactly for that kind of thing. I know what's up in the mountain. I know what's dangerous and out of my control. Mm-hmm. But you have people that will come from more triathlon and road running, which is not a bad thing at all. But there's a learning curve to understanding how to deal with nature, how to be safe out there, because the wild is not necessarily exactly forgiving sometimes.
Right.
And even if and that was maybe more obvious for me when I was at Tour des Gens this year, you're always like 5 kilometers or 3 miles from a village, but you can die 3 miles from there. Like it's, you can die just the same. Like it doesn't matter that it's close and you can see it. Like it's not helping you. And understanding the vulnerability of, like a little things going wrong, like being caught on a mountain, the wrong mountain peak in the middle of a thunderstorm. Yeah, that's not a great situation. Like it can take a little bit of time to get to safety, and understanding these things is important. But I understand people's frustration with the lottery. And at the same time, I think it will make it more special when you get in. For me, that's how I try to justify not feeling too bad about it. Of course, I would love to be picked. But
joys and sorrows on the first weekend in December, huh?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you apply, because some people will get in with applying 1 year, maybe, if you're super duper lucky. But is it as special as if you would apply 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years in a row, and then you finally get in, and that's kind of the celebration a little bit. And I see it more as the end of a long journey, and I try as much as possible, and I do tell people as much as possible, like, enjoy the time leading there. Like, again, Hardrock qualifiers are really fun race. Like
Right.
you won't go wrong. And then one day you get picked, and then it's like, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But until
Yeah.
then, you just have fun, you gain experience, and then it will make the experience much more valuable.
Right.
But, you know,
Right.
it does take a
Right.
while to get in
Yeah.
nowadays. And I don't see that improving anytime soon, which,
It
you know, that's
does.
just
Yeah.
the nature of things. So.
Right. Yeah. Simon, I think you're exactly right. I don't, and we struggle with that all the time, in terms of what's the best, most efficient, most fair, most equitable, most transparent way that we can do our lottery. And so we actually now have 4 lotteries. We have a lottery for men who have finished, women who have finished. We have a lottery for men who have not finished, and men and women who have not finished. And so we're trying to, in those lotteries, give as much, again, that balance between having been there, experience it, be the keeper of the Hard Rock culture, be the keeper of the Hard Rock values, and pass that on to people who are like, I just want to be there. I want to be part of it. And what we've seen lately is more people coming to volunteer, to pace, that kind of thing. And so creating a great experience for them now has become part of it too. I mean, we have last year we had 600 volunteers for 140 people. So, so be a part of the family that way. I mean, this year we have a runner. His name's Chris Twiggs. Maybe some of your audience knows his name. Hard Rock finished 17 times. He's finished Hard Rock 17 times, and he didn't get in this year. But he's like, I'll be there. I'm gonna volunteer, and I'm gonna do some other things, which is oftentimes is as much fun as running, or so he says. Yeah.
Yeah.
To your point too, and I know this is something probably some of your listeners maybe at least know, or maybe they're interested in. About 4 years ago, we took a really hard look at how can we as a industry leader, so to speak, kind of in the field of ultra running, use our position to kind of do some things. And so one of the things we looked at was, how can we get more women to participate, and how can we adjust and show that we're serious about that? And so now our lottery, the percentage of women who apply is represented on the start line. So this year we had 21% of our applicants were women. So 21% of our field is going to be women. And then we turn around, and that's in July. Then in September, with the help of the North Face, we do a women's running weekend, because what we found is that there were just a lot of women, especially, who were really nervous about being up in the mountains. They weren't sure of where they were going, what to do, that kind of stuff. So giving them a chance to come to the San Juans, to be in an environment that is challenging but not threatening to them, hopefully will continue to make inroads with more and more women in the sport of ultra running.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Something that I do notice myself also is, if you have a race where you have different distances, there's almost parity for most distance, or it's closer to parity for most distances. But when you get to like the 100-mile or longer, that's where there's a significant drop. And talking with people, I think it's because, I don't know if it's cultural, but women tended to be a little bit more like, I'm not sure I can finish 100 miles, so I'm not going to sign up for 100-mile. Whereas guys like, oh, I'll just wing it. And like, of course I can do it. Like, and I'll stay hard. And it's like, okay. And then that leads to more application. And I think encouraging, or, just that training run, or saying like, hey, like, you can actually do it, and you have the capabilities to do that. I believe in you. Can help, kind of break that barrier. And then more application leads to more of them running it. And then it's closer to parity. Right. I think the point about volunteering is great too. Truth is, I think trail running has been built and continue to be built on volunteers a lot. We work hard to provide for each other, support each other. Either it's volunteering at race, but it can be supporting other runner, pacing, crewing, coaching, these sorts of things. And I think it's important that you're reinforcing that. For many people, it won't be necessarily at Hardrock itself, because you can't just fly there, but it's more broadly, you volunteer at races in general. And that's just, that helps create a better community overall. And that, I think you guys are doing a good job at that, of course.
Yeah. Because ultra runners are just great people.
We are great people.
all
I
over.
agree with that. We're great and humble.
Yeah.
I
I'd love to
agree,
see the
though.
shift in the yeah.
Well, our part of if you're selected to Hardrock, one of the things that we require every runner do prior to June, if they're running, this has to be done by June. They have to demonstrate and have given 8 hours of volunteer work to a local run. Could be anything from volunteering in an aid station to working on trails or whatever. But that sense of giving back, I think, Simon, that you're talking about is something that is fairly unique in sport, where the competitors not only, they want to give back, and they give back to the sport that means so much to them.
I saw that you guys still do that service requirement, Dale, and I really appreciate that. I've been around for about 15, 16 years, since about 2010, and I started to see those requirements fall off, and especially at COVID and never return.
Right.
So there are no more trail requirements, or less, very much less now so than there was back before COVID era.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I think that's another indicator of a challenge that our sport faces. As we get more and more people into our sport that aren't used to that culture of giving back, it's almost like you want to almost mandate it so that they can see that it's a cool thing. And then, hopefully that will just change over time, because I remember when the first 10 years of of Hardrock, it was never an issue for people to come and volunteer or help or whatever. And so because that's what ultra runners just did naturally. But as we've gotten groups and other people from other walks of life or other areas of athletic competition, sometimes they need to be shown.
Yeah, I agree with that. The other sports, because I myself only once met someone who openly said, like, I never applied for a race that asked for volunteering hours. And in my head, I was like, all right, you never applied for a Hardrock. Like, I have more odds of getting in, so I don't care. But it was such an odd thing to say, because we're all dependent on volunteers. And for me, I think it can be annoying a little bit if the race mandates a very specific things, like you need to volunteer like trail work but not race work, or it needs to be at this race, or it needs to be on this trail, because then it's really constricting how I can construct my own calendar, which can be tricky. It's pretty rare that like they're very specific if like you need to work on the trail for the course, but sometimes it happens like, well, I can just travel there for that. I'll give somewhere else, but at the same time, I understand the nature of it. But to straight up say, I won't volunteer, like, and sign up for a race like that, I was like, fine, like, bye. But like, you're really not having the right mindset right now. It's It's unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah. It is unfortunate. Yeah. But you're right. More chances for you, right?
Yeah. I'm still waiting.
Exactly. Yeah. More chances for us.
Yeah.
Actually, I said in 2013 I helped Betsy. Yeah. Oh, I said in 2013 or I helped Betsy, but I think it was 2012. So 13, I was pulled like 18th or 17th, and I made it to second on the wait list and didn't get in on that year. So I'm still I skipped a couple years, but now I'm back applying again. So on and so forth.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Simon.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, and I think there's a lag a little bit, but yeah, Dale. By the way, my goal right now, and if you want to screw up my goals, that's totally okay. But my goal is to run 100 miler before I get in Hardrock. So the race is on.
So the race is on. The race is on.
So if you want to screw up my plan, you can fix it for next year or something.
Goal, Simon.
Yeah. Well, I'm well on.
I'm going to remember that. I'm going to count next time I see your name on the applicant list. I'm going to count. I'm going to go to your Ultra Simon account or wherever and count how many 100 milers. And if it's not close, you're out.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
That's fine by me. But when I cross the 100, I got to get in though.
Okay. Guaranteed. How many do you have now?
51.
Okay. Cool.
So we're getting there.
That's cool. Yeah.
I don't want the same deal, Dale. I don't want any part of that deal. just to clarify, that's a Simon thing, not a Brian
It's just
thing.
Simon's thing. Yeah.
Yes.
But you know what, Simon, I really appreciate what you said about there are a lot of really cool events. There's cool places to see. There are cool events to experience and things like that. And I'm fortunate because I think we put on an event that people gravitate to. They like being part of that kind of stuff. But we are certainly not the be all end all, And so having that mindset of, okay, I didn't get this one, I'm going to go do this one because there are some really cool things to see.
That's one of the great thing about trail running is that there's no two races that are exact. Well, I guess there's two that are the same, but there's a lot of races that are very different. A Hardrock is not like, and I love Zion by Zion 100. I know that's my thing, but like I love Zion. It's like, well, it's totally different.
Yeah.
But both can be great experience, and I'd rather try.
Are you going to be there? Are you going to be there in April? Are you going to be there in April?
Not this year, probably not. So I'm doing Arizona Monster 300, which is just before. So I might drive there, but maybe not this year. I've done the last 4 years though.
Yeah. The reason I ask is my nephew, who was a hurdler and a sprinter in high school and a soccer player, has drank the Kool-Aid and is now going to do his first ultra at Zion in April.
Well, that's a good one to do for sure.
We're going to go out and cheer him on and, help him enjoy his experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Dale, where do you see Hardrock in 3, 5, 7, 10 years? Like what's the trajectory? What does that look like?
Brian, that's such a great question because I don't know if I really have a definitive answer. I mean, I have some things that I hope will happen in the next 3 to 5 years, but my long-term vision for Hardrock is really to bring what got us here to more people whenever I can. I think we'll see the technology of things will certainly play a part in that, in terms of live streams, runner tracking, satellite coverage, that kind of thing. So I definitely see we've embraced that. And so that will continue to be part of our event. At the same time, I hope that if somebody comes when Simon does his 100th 100 miler and he comes, that he gets the same experience and feels the same about Hardrock that the person who was here 10 years ago or 15 years ago, the experience that they had. And so it's not where I see it going. It's what I hope we don't lose, if that makes sense.
Totally.
So I think there's that. I don't see Hardrock, and we kind of talked about it a little bit. I don't see Hardrock ever getting to want to be one of these mega, 1,000-person events. First of all, our permit won't allow it, but I think that would diminish, a lot of the experiences. Yeah, I hope we grow. I hope we grow with the sport and are not an impediment to the sport. And then finally, I think one of the things we've been able to do because of really kind of who we are is we've been able to give back, to use our name and our good standing to give back to the community, whether it's with a women's running weekend or, we've now donated over $370,000 to local scholarships for kids. We're actively engaged with other outside organizations on trail etiquette and trail education and that kind of thing. And so hopefully we'll be able to use our good name to benefit the greater good of not only the San Juans, but of the
something that I can see for sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't get the sense that you guys ever did that for the money itself necessarily. And if you had wanted to generate more revenue, I think decision would have been very different. But that also gives you a lot of freedom in terms of doing what you think is right. Yeah. And the parallel I draw to myself is like, I have a YouTube channel and that's never going to overtake my job.
And
right?
Simon,
So that gives me the flexibility of doing whatever I feel like. If I want to do a silly movie that sponsor wouldn't like, I don't care. What can they do?
And we have, we're lucky that we have corporate support, but we've never had to get to the point where our corporate support has dictated what Hardrock should be. and that kind of thing. We've never gotten to that. And part of it is because of the caliber of the companies and the partners that we have. I mean, we're kind of not picky, but we have a set of values, and if we don't think a company will reflect those values or have that in their corporate culture, then we'll pass and stuff like that. So it's not that we're totally anti-corp, donations and things like that, but it's something that is done with some real alignment of values and discussion and stuff like that. Is like, is this company going to do something that will benefit Hardrock and the people who come to Hardrock, rather than us selling our soul to the highest bidder?
Well, we thank you so much, Dale, for your time this evening.
God, this has been fun, you guys. I so appreciate talking with you.
Let's do it next week. You
want to do it next week? All right. All right. Yeah. No, again, thank you for spending the time with me. Appreciate it. And
Likewise.
Look forward to seeing you're both part of the Hardrock. Our tent we have a big tent, so you're welcome to come and hang out and be part of the festivities in July. But
I've played the French translator for some of your runner. So
Oh,
I'm
you
happy to
did?
do that again. Yeah.
Yeah.
2 years ago,
Yeah.
Benyat, who finished second, I was a translator for I Run Far.
Right. Well, reach out, Simon,
experience.
because we've got one of our French female runners is probably going to need some help. But no, we'd love to see you guys. No, really, and I hope this goes well. And it's been a pleasure talking with you both.
Thanks so much, Dale. We'll look for you in July, if not sooner.
There you go. You know where I'll be, standing there in the middle of a street next to the rock. Just look for the big rock.
Yeah, watching 148 people kiss a rock.
Yeah, that's it.
All right,
Okay,
take care.
guys. Okay, take care.